Hi, I'm Mehr Husain and you're watching The Coffee Table. Today we've got a really fun show. Well, they're always fun, but this one is going to be super fun. We're talking about fashion and we're talking about a very special book. And on set, talking about this book with me today are Mehr Husain and Saad Sarfraz. Hi guys.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So Mehr, you are a journalist and Saad, you are a photojournalist, which is an excellent combination as far as books go. But what is interesting to me is that both of you decided to collaborate and put together an extremely, what sounds like a very unique and really exciting book. So I want you to tell me more about it.
Well, yes. The book is about the fashion industry of Pakistan, how it started, where it came from, who were the game players, who were the game changers, and how it all came together.
Ah,
yeah.
So that's fascinating. Like that's such a, I think, a unique aspect to look at Pakistani history and through the lens of fashion. But why fashion?
Well, there are various elements to it. Myself, I've led a very privileged and I've been a privileged life, and I've been lucky to live in several different countries. Mm-hmm. In each one, clothing was very, very important.
Right.
And so that's something that really influenced me from a very early age. Mm-hmm. May not look like it, but it certainly did.
No, well, I think it looks very nice.
Thank you. And it was living in London that I became very aware that wherever I lived, I sort of absorbed in all the fashion, and London is a fashion capital of the world, as you know. Hmm. But I wasn't wearing it literally on the street. There was a lot of individuality that was celebrated. Hmm. And moving back to Pakistan, I was acutely aware of the fact that people dress very similar. Yes. There were these trends that were coming in and everybody was looking the same. And I thought to myself, well, who's defining the market? Are they the designers? Where, for example, in the West, you have couture and you have high street, and what you see on the ramp, you may not see on the high street. And here in Pakistan, what I noticed was that what was on the ramp was available on shadis. And it was like...
Which is like, which is, I think, the whole point of it, really.
And it just got me thinking, what is going on?
Right.
And finally, when my son started school, there I'd be with my T-shirt and my track pants and my trainers, and suddenly at 7 in the morning, I'd see this mom coming in with like 4-inch heels, and I was thinking, who is telling you to dress this way? What is going on here?
What is informing these choices of
Absolutely.
School drop-off?
Who is expecting you to dress in such a manner? And those questions got me thinking that I need to get to the bottom of this mystery of who tells us how to dress. And when I started thinking about it, I realized that it would be so wonderful if Pakistan could have a fashion book similar to the ones that are churned out in the West. We have these beautiful fashion books of different designers, from different elements, cultures. And I thought Pakistan doesn't have any of it. So once I realized, this is going to be a visual project, I knew I had to turn to Saad.
And it's a coffee table book.
It's a coffee table book, but it's a mixture of visuals and text.
So I'm assuming that, Saad, the visual writing was done by you, and the word writing was done by Mehr.
Exactly.
So you're not a fashion photographer.
No, no.
What kind of photography do you do?
It's mostly the more photojournalistic type. It's more about, like conflict and war and stuff like that. Then a lot of social issues also, human rights. It's more like that, actually. But my work in the book is more of the archives. Oh. And it's very interesting that when we thought of doing the book, I thought these archives would be easy to collect because, we just talk to the designers we're writing about and they just give it to us. But I realized that a lot of them did not have the archives.
Oh, they don't keep an archive.
They don't keep, they've done some amazing work and they don't have any visual record of that.
Oh, wow.
And at the same time, we don't have the kind of public libraries that people maybe in the West have. Yes. So that's where actually the visual part became actually very difficult for us. Yeah. So I had to do a lot of running around. I had to visit like a lot of old bookstores. Yeah. And a lot of them had like 80s, 90s magazines. Like
magazines, okay.
But not a lot of these old fashion magazines. They had like different other publications. So I had to go to Karachi a lot, just to find these archives. And it was quite, like a roller coaster ride in a way that,
But how exciting, and what an interesting departure from your usual work.
Yeah, exactly.
And the whole, I think it's really interesting that there's no notion of sort of fashion being a serious thing. So like, why would you have an archive for fashion? Why would you want to keep your pictures? Even designers who are creating these things themselves didn't have a record of it. Exactly. That's really interesting. So a lot of the archival material is from old magazines and newspapers and catalogs.
So I had to go inside, their old stores and basically ask the accounts department, because they would pay the photographers and writers who would do their stories like back in the 80s and 90s. And we were very lucky that in some places I spent 6 hours, inside an office in the basement,
sort of
taking each and every photograph, for the archives. And and I'm really happy because that's a major part of the book now, and that's exclusive to the book also. So a lot of the photos and archives you get to see in the book, they've never been published before.
Ooh, exciting. So it's not
exciting.
Just those throwback pictures of PIE air hostesses and everyone is like, wow. So that's so cool, Saad. I have like this mental image of you in some sort of dusty basement, opening boxes and going through all sorts of sort of piles of
dust allergies,
yellowing magazines. And
that is exactly how it happened.
Yeah, it's like opening it up and saying, Eureka, this is a picture, amazing. It's so romantic. I really like that.
It didn't feel romantic at the time. We were panicking because it was a matter of, you see, you have text, which is very important, but you also want to share a visual history which communicates far more than what the text could do.
And you can't do a book about fashion and style without it being visually really amazing to look at.
Absolutely, because what we discovered was that while the interviews we conducted, they revealed a lot about how the industry came into being, they were unable to communicate what the imagery and the power and the impact the imagery had on creating a very liberal, progressive, emancipated culture of Pakistan that we don't know today, because the world has changed. And that was very, people say that, well, if you've got interviews, if you didn't get those archives, it didn't really matter. But it did matter, because you can actually see the entire cultural history of Pakistan through those images. It's a story unto itself.
Yeah, it's a sort of visual map, I imagine.
Absolutely. And how Pakistan and society has changed in terms of not just fashion, but in terms of culture, in terms of perspective, in terms of dressing, how people dress. And what we've done is we've looked at both men and women. It's not just female-centric. Because we feel that fashion there are two views when it comes to fashion. One, that it's an elitist thing, that people of high money, high society indulge in it. That's not true. What we discovered was that some of the biggest game changers were people who came from within society, very normal middle-class backgrounds, and those who were up at the elite end actually came down to the local level to not rediscover, but to discover what this new country, Pakistan, had to offer. And then they took it to the masses.
And that's so fascinating to me, because in so many ways, fashion and politics and history is all sort of intertwined.
Absolutely.
And even literature, with art movements and literary movements, a lot of things that were happening, for example, in the 60s, with the progressive writers movement and things like that, it was filtering down from what was happening in the rest of the world at the time. There was a much greater interest in socialism and getting out there. And the same way with fashion, there are a lot of runway trends that are sort of on the ramps in Tokyo and Paris and Milan and London. It does trickle down to Pakistan and trickle out to the rest of the world, really, not just Pakistan.
So you had a young Pakistani nation that was very emancipated, very progressive in terms of their dressing. They were eager, and the world wanted to see what Pakistan had to offer. And Pakistani designers took their work onto the global stage.
Really? Like, one doesn't even know about this, really. So what's the trajectory? So where does the book begin? Like, where does the fashion begin? Because, well, I'm assuming partition, because if it's about Pakistan, then it must begin.
Absolutely.
In the late 40s.
We start from the 1950s.
Right.
Where the earliest form of, there was no term designer that applied to this brand new country at the time. They were just women. It's interesting that the whole industry the foundation is solid women, female-oriented. There were these women who used to make ghararas and wedding dresses for their friends, their families, based in Karachi. And
And were they sort of doing it themselves, like cutting and sewing and things?
They worked with local craftsmen.
Okay.
The ideas were there, but they worked with local craftsmen to embody what this country had to offer, what was on offer, using local materials, local thread work, local craftsmanship.
And also keeping in mind that post-partition, everything was upside down.
Absolutely.
So I'm sure there must have been constraints in terms of material and in terms of, you know, I don't know.
The constraints of the material came.
Craftsmen, skilled people who could sort of do what was required.
What happened was when Pakistan was created, there was a lot of foreign influence. Like I said, through the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, there was the swinging 60s, the hipster 70s. The hippie trail was there. Hippies were coming into Pakistan.
Yes.
Pierre Cardin came to Pakistan.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And
didn't the Beatles come to Pakistan as well?
Yeah, I think they came to Karachi. They met people at the port, maybe.
Barack Obama visited in
just
the
at the
70s.
port. Saad is also a musician, so I'm like, you know the music questions, you know the answers to that.
So there was a lot of curiosity of what this new country had to offer.
Yeah.
And then, interestingly, Minna, the fashion icons were actually politicians.
Oh,
yes.
Wow, like what? Like Rana Liaquat Ali Khan.
Yes.
Ooh, and all her really cool karala. She always looked
Absolutely.
fantastic.
And the ladies, they used to wear very stylish saris, very daring, what some people would say now. There was obviously Rati, who had been a style icon pre-partition, but her style was definitely
Mrs. Jinnah.
Copied, yes. And then,
and you know, the hair and all of that as well. Like, Saad, do you see that? Did you see it when you were sort of digging up your archives?
The hair and makeup.
Yeah, yeah. And is it more sort of women who are being more expressive with their clothes and things?
Women, and then Mehr mentioned politicians.
Yeah.
So we see that, you know, I think in the 70s and 80s, with Bhuttos and the Sherwanis, you know.
Bhutto brought the Chinese collar in because
Mao
of his trip to China.
Yeah.
But the wonderful thing is, and this is where I think where the story really picks up from, is that while all that was happening, simultaneously, not as a reaction, as in a completely different vein, you had this group of friends starting from Karachi who just wanted to live their lives.
Okay.
And, you know, a lot of people think that in Zia's time that this was the end of the country.
Of course, it was so repressive. It was just sort of everything that was beautiful and fun and good was being squashed.
But on the other hand, this group, mostly Karachi-based, Seher Sehgal was the only one in Lahore who was doing things at the time, bringing art and culture to the fore in Lahore. In Karachi, you had this group of friends who just wanted to go out and see what was happening in the city, having returned from university and college and having experienced a more liberal time in Pakistan. They just wanted to rediscover what's happening in the city. And
wow,
that's
sort
how
of
it happened.
Bunch of cool kids, and just hold the cool kids.
Yeah.
And we're just going to take a quick break, and don't go anywhere if you want to know more about the cool kids. We'll see you in a bit. Hi, welcome back to the coffee table. We're having an amazing conversation, lots of laughs that you were not a part of, but now that you're back, now you will be. So, we were talking about the cool kids in Karachi and a few in Lahore, to give Lahore its due credit, and none in Islamabad.
No, Islamabad actually came later on.
But at that point, we're just teasing you, Islamabadis. You all are cool too.
Islamabad was very much part of the scene. Yeah. What happened was that while you have Seher Sehgal in Lahore, in Karachi there was a group of friends called the Style Mafia. That was a term coined by
the Style Mafia, and they were like a set of, you know, like group of photographers and makeup artists and designers mainly. Yeah. So they would like get together and I've made clothes or something. So the photographer, you know, they would all team up, and that's where, you know, intentionally or unintentionally, that's how I think that would actually lay the foundation for, you know, this entire industry in a way.
Wow. So the sort of the actual glamour of fashion and visual representation of it, because like what is fashion if no one's seeing it?
It started from within someone's flat, and that's where it started out.
Quite homespun.
Very homespun, absolutely. And
how great. It's like the sort of American equivalent of a garage band that then made it really big.
You nailed it. That's the best way to put it out. Yeah. And what strikes one is the sheer innocence of it all. You know, people generally think, oh, you're in fashion, you must be doing something really dirty. Not at all. These were just a young bunch of kids having fun.
Experimenting with whatever it was that they were doing. Yeah. So that visually, like when you see the photos from like the 50s, 60s, the 70s, is there like a marked difference in the stuff that's then coming out of the 80s then?
Yeah, I think in the 80s and initial 90s, they were more experimental. Now what we have is pretty much standard and simple in a way that, like there's not a lot of experimentation.
So in a way, it's kind of gone back to a more particular kind of staged look that maybe there was in the 60s. Like I'm just thinking of things like, our parents' wedding photos and everyone sort of standing like this. Or like this. That sort of thing.
Freshness. For example, in the 50s and 60s, the archives that we have are actually print ads, those vintage print ads. And even in those, the women are dressed in a very sort of, the poses that they're striking are so casual and free-flowing. Natural.
Yeah.
And then you have the 80s and the 90s where there was a lot of expression of creativity, of art, sexuality, taking on political issues. For example, there was a magazine called Extra that had been taken out by Fifi Harun.
Right. I remember, but there was an X instead of EX. It was they chopped the E off, and that was just like the beginning of
Extra,
the end.
Fifi took on a lot of political issues, and she commented on them through those fashion shoots.
Wow.
Which is brilliant.
How clever.
Very clever.
And how subversive. And subversive in a way that's accessible to people also. Like when you think of satire and you think that, like if somebody's writing something, like Dario Fo's writing a play criticizing the regime in Italy, but you have fashion and anybody can just like open a magazine and look at a picture.
Absolutely.
That's so cool. Like I wish I knew what it looked
and
like.
Even they were talking about issues which even now in 2019 we're not talking about.
Really?
And I was surprised. We've put in covers of those, like the Extra magazine, for example. And it has these headings, different topics. We don't talk about those, even in our general media.
Yeah.
But we have that in there. So I was really impressed that, like a good 25 years ago, they were talking about these things.
Yeah. And somehow there wasn't, maybe there wasn't as much censorship as we thought there was back then.
No, there wasn't. There's another magazine, Ashad Tareen brought out Men's Club, which was Pakistan's first men's magazine.
Oh, how nice.
It was wonderful. I think, again, the element that fashion is just for women and for ladies only, it does not hold true at all. I mean, here was a man who decided that here we have a young male population who's clearly, there was a lot of energy, a lot of creative, happy energy, and people need to channel that in ways that are productive, not destructive to themselves as individuals or to society. So the men's magazine came out, and the images in that are so, you have Mehr, you have all these old PTV actors who suddenly became models overnight. It's wonderful to see, and the poses that they're striking.
Like what? Like
hardly, they're provocative, but
really,
there's such an air of innocence about them that you can't help but feel that this is not, they weren't trying to corrupt society, but they were just trying to say, live a little.
Or just sort of see what could be done, the sort of possibilities of what, anything really, like the world is an oyster at that point.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then there are the photographers who must be given credit, like Tapu Javeri and Asif Raza, who in their both ways really pushed models out of their comfort zone, really took the whole idea of a set to a whole different level. It was no longer standing against a white background looking down. It was about going out there, capturing Pakistan's culture and saying, this is what it is. We have fashion, we have history, we have culture, and you know what? It looks damn good.
Yeah. But Saad, do you think that was this vibe was also being fueled by better technology and more exposure, where a lot of like the style mafia people went abroad to study and then they came back?
Yeah.
I'm assuming yes?
Yes. Okay. What happened was there was a lot of awareness amongst them and how to do something in a very constructive manner. Yeah. I mean, one of the models that we have is Atiya Khan. And for Atiya, modeling, she just fell into it. She used to work in advertising. But she told us that, it was more a case of doing things in a conservative society, but was progressive, but also respected the boundaries. So you have a lot of people who understood that this is the environment we're working with.
That there's a balance that they wanted to maintain themselves.
Even by the 90s, when society had opened up fashion, the designers were all there in their full force, designing for men and women. There was always this respect for the environment around them within which they were working. I mean, Saad, you've seen the photographs.
At the same time, I think when you have certain barriers, it's more exciting, creating something.
You've only got like, film to shoot on or whatever, I don't know, like the set, like outdoor shoot.
Yes, but like you said, I'm pretty sure, yes, international exposure helped them. I mean, Tariq Amin, people like Tariq Amin, Studio 54.
Absolutely.
And, like Tapu and all these guys, they had great exposure. But again, once they were back home here, so that's, where you get to see their work, obviously, and it's amazing. I mean, the kind of stuff they were creating. So it's great.
And what's also it strikes one is, people think that because these people are affiliated with the fashion industry, they may not have normal lives. But
or that they're really divorced from quote unquote realities of Pakistan, and you're so privileged, and it's coming from an elite place.
But that's not true at all. I mean, this is something that blew me away as well. I have to admit, some of them got married, some of them had children, some of them were fulfilling parental responsibility. For example, you said Islamabad. Tariq Amin packed up a lucrative, fantastic, high-flying career in Karachi to move to Islamabad to be with his family when they needed him. I mean, that's remarkable.
So I think that's a really interesting point to bring up, is that the glamour of fashion sort of divorces everybody from the idea that fashion people are regular people, and that fashion doesn't necessarily mean that people are just legends, untouchable legends. You can still be a legend, of course.
Of course, they're all legends.
You also have homes and families and kids and cats and things.
If anything, that adds to the legend that you have these role models to look up to, and you say, I want to be like this, I want to be like that, I want to do what so-and-so is doing. But at the same time, there's also an element of grounded reality that when it's all over and done with and you go home, you are, somebody's son or daughter or somebody's wife or husband or somebody's father or mother or somebody's cousin or sibling, whatever. The fact is that reality is always very different.
Yeah.
You have to create art, you put it out, and then you go back into your shell to sort of rejuvenate.
Right. And I think that's one really interesting thing I find about Pakistani designers also, and people who are in the industry, even in spite of Instagram and Facebook and being able to take your own picture, not needing someone like Saad to come and take your picture for you and put it in a magazine. You can just do it yourself. But in spite of that, I find that Pakistani fashion seems to have that kind of, that groundedness. And I mean it in a nice way. I mean that we don't have that kind of, or maybe we do, maybe the book tells us more about this, that kind of sort of overblown Karl Lagerfeld type legend person who's known to be like this big old diva. And
I think when they were writing the Urdu to English dictionary, the word diva got lost in translation because we do not have divas. We don't have divas.
Really, I know. And it's like, you don't see this sort of narrative being created around certain designers, or even them wanting to kind of foster that idea. And maybe that does come from the fact that we're desis, and at the end of the day, you have a lot of things that as Pakistanis, and this is part of who we are, is that there's so many things that keep us grounded. If nothing else, your mom, who's like, that's not great.
Who do you think you are? You come
what are
home,
these clothes?
Yeah. Who do you think you are? You come home, you eat the food on the table. That's it.
Oh my goodness.
Absolutely.
So Mehr, now again, we're sort of, I tend to talk to this side more because you did most of the writing. And we don't have visuals, but because the book is obviously, when it comes out, we'll show you things. You can come back
out with a bang.
So when is the book out, Saad?
I think hopefully in a month or two max, yes.
Okay, that's really exciting. So around August.
Yeah.
So around August. So at the moment,
it's your patriotic present to the country.
Absolutely. And I think in particular for the young people of Pakistan, because there were two things that were in my mind when I started this. That one, I wanted, you see, the young population of Pakistan today are very different to what we were, to what previous generations were.
This is like a patriotic present.
Yes, this is my patriotic present. Yes,
from
because
Mehr and Saad. Thanks.
You've
traced our history.
Absolutely. History, culture,
Yeah, because it's nothing
fashion,
short of a tribute to the industry, obviously, the Pakistani fashion industry.
Yeah, yeah. And I just want something that the youth can sort of claim as their own and say, this is what we used to be, this is what we're capable of, and this is our potential, and feel proud of it.
I think that's really important, this sort of the idea of where you came from. And for us as Pakistanis, and we're what, third generation Pakistanis?
Yes, we are.
And our kids are fourth, and that's very new. That's like babies.
Absolutely.
We're just babies,
Absolutely.
really, in terms of like being Pakistani and having that identity, and especially coming from a country that has sort of
gone through so
millennia
many changes.
old, and the culture, like Indian culture, is thousands of years old.
The subcontinental
Culture, and we share that culture, but at the same time, we also have our own thing going on.
Absolutely. I mean, Saad has lived abroad, and I've lived abroad, and I think we both identify with the diaspora as well. So that was the other element, that you need something to give to people that's not just rooted in politics or history. You need to give something that unites the diaspora to the homeland in a beautiful way, substantially and aesthetically speaking. Because, you know, after partition, what happened was you have this diaspora abroad that is desperate to cling to something tangible. What is that tangible? It comes in the form of clothing and food. So I also felt that they needed something that spoke to them about how their culture back home had changed and how they had changed abroad as well. How their own clothing had changed.
Right, or not changed. You
Or
know,
not
there was those memes about, like, you know, why do diaspora kids wear wedding clothes on Eid?
Yes.
Because, you know.
Or, you know.
Like, a lot of times, like, you get stuck in this time warp also.
Or even how they're portrayed in, like, East is East. You have the British Muslim Pakistani community still being portrayed in those baggy Georgette crepe
Yeah, with
chiffons.
those sort of weird half sleeve.
With the lace on it.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, well, that's not true anymore,
Yeah,
but that's
no
what
one's
they've clung
wearing
on to
that.
because they're so proud of their clothing. And so they're sort of present to them as well, saying, you know, here you go, enjoy, show the world what you have to offer.
Be more fash, get with it.
Get with it and be
Because
like,
it's also
this is
like a time
history.
warp. Isn't it also like a sense of history and a sense of belonging and nostalgia, really? And there
Absolutely.
is a certain nostalgia that's sort of crept into clothing now.
Yes.
Because, you know, there are a lot of designers who are going back to ghararas and more saris and more sort of subcontinental back in the
I mean,
day.
Saad, did you feel that even in the visuals that fashion has come full circle in terms of dressing?
I did.
The 90s were probably the most
reactionary and
hardly. That's the thing.
No.
People think that the fashion industry was a reaction to events. Not at all. It was an organic movement that came out of sheer original thought process and creativity. But I think once we saw towards the end, towards the 2000s, that the industry, the work that was being churned out was it had stabilized, plateaued.
Yeah.
that's really interesting to me. Like you said before about how we seem to have reached a kind of plateau, really, which is a kind way to put it. Or isn't that boring?
That is a bit boring.
You know,
Yes.
it seems like when I go on Instagram and I look at pictures, it seems like everybody's doing really exciting things. Like there's so much more out there, but at the same time, it's all the same. Like it all looks the same.
I think our book stops where it gets boring.
Yeah.
In
Yeah,
terms of the chronology of
Yeah,
events.
because it was like, oh gosh. I mean, we did see some of the imagery, modern imagery, but it just didn't have that feel to it. It was like, there's nothing new being done here now.
But I would still want to work on a second part to this book, Mehr. where, you know,
after 10 years,
the archives would be
you see-
easier.
Yes,
because,
they're digital now.
yeah, they're digital now.
Yeah.
But did the designers that you worked with, are they now more sort of careful now about their archives? Were you able to sort of share materials with them and say, look, I found your clothes?
We did
Yeah,
that.
actually, some of the photographers were like, you know, like they, you know, if you find some of my work, please share it with me. So I was
Which
like,
is really
okay.
endearing because you think we look back and we feel so nostalgic about how the film cameras were so nice and those Polaroid cameras. But it's now that it's hitting me now that, oh my God, there's a huge risk. There was a huge risk with those of you lose the negative, gone. You lose the imagery, gone.
Also, the process is costlier, you know, because there's film, you have to develop the film. So nowadays, it's not as expensive as it was.
And there's a lot of Photoshop and touching up in images now.
Do you think that really interferes with the genuineness of the experience? Like, is there like a vision, or is it mostly about the vision a photographer has or a designer has, and they sort of work together to create that illusion?
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with it because they're not really recreating reality in a way. It's the vision, like you said, and a fashion shoot can be something really creative and crazy. And digital manipulation of Photoshop, I think if it allows, you know, the photographer to achieve their vision, I think it's really okay because I don't think there's
And
anything
it's
wrong with it.
interesting,
Moving
despite
towards,
whether
like-
it's digital or film, for everyone, for every in every decade, the ultimate goal was the final image.
That's the sort of the golden goose or the vision, really. You're sort of
vision, yeah.
achieving the
Yeah, because
vision.
in the age of Snapchat filters, I think it's okay.
Oh God!
On that note,
doggy
we're just going to take a
filters.
quick break and we'll see you in a second. Don't go away. Hi, welcome back. We're still talking about fashion and still talking about the book and doing lots of fun things on the couch. Nice to see you again. Okay, Saad, so tell me, this book took you guys 2 years to put together.
Yes.
That's a long time. So
yeah.
between you digging in the basement in Karachi, looking for things, I love that image. It's like my favorite. It's like etched in my
is,
mind. When the
huh?
book comes out, I'm going to be like, so romantic, put together in the authentic way.
Now you know the real story, how this image was got. Yes.
Yeah, and all of you know it as well now. So did you just, were you able to find material in Pakistan, or did you have to reach out to people outside of Pakistan for material and to put stuff together?
Yeah, so I had to go to a lot of these old publications in their offices, and I had to visit a lot of these Urdu bazaars all across Pakistan, looking for old magazines. And a lot of the shopkeepers were like, why do you want this? So I would tell them, I'm working on a thesis. So, it's about...
It's for school.
Yeah, exactly. So
It's serious.
Research project.
research project. And the end result of, like almost more than 2 years of all the effort that me and Mehr have put in is that the book will be launched globally through Amazon. That's great because we have people, I'm sure a lot of people abroad are going to be, interested in the book. And the people we've interviewed, they're spread all across the world. They're based in London, Toronto, like literally all over the world.
Wow. So you had to sort of phone people and get in touch with them.
Yeah, I'm sure Mehr must have stacked a long telephone bill because
I really did,
she had to talk to people for like 5 hours. And these people have a lot of stories, about how they've actually,
And it must have been nice for them as well to be like, well, somebody is working in a serious way
That's how
on
it
your
started.
life's work.
That's how we started. When I rang them up, it was like, guys, we need to walk down memory lane together. And
What a nice way to put it. Even I would
and I think some of the people are not active anymore, right? Like some of the people...
like they're retired.
Yeah.
Well, yes, because the industry changed, the world changed, Pakistan changed, and suddenly they just felt that this is no longer our field anymore. We have to move on. The fact that there was some people migrated abroad because of family reasons. So you have, the original fashion industry is now scattered all over the globe.
And I find it so poignant also because we are a country that moved. It's a country of people, a country that happened because people moved to, uprooted themselves and moved and then keep moving. And then there's a sense of movement and there's a sense of
Loss as well.
Yes, and rebirth, but also a sense of loss and things that you've left behind.
Absolutely. And we hope that this book will fill the void in this multi-million-dollar industry, which is really given, back in the day, in fact, up till 2000, fashion was a huge part of the national and international Pakistani identity.
Really? Like, it doesn't feel like that anymore somehow.
No, because whenever you had these international delegations or you had these international events, fashion was a huge part of Pakistan. I remember it was in the late 90s, there was a show that was held at the Royal Albert Hall called The Rhythms of the Indus. It was a huge success.
Wow.
It was the first time.
The Royal Albert Hall.
Yes.
That's a big deal.
It was massive.
And that's a very prestigious place to have a show like that.
Absolutely. And it was fabulous because it put Pakistan on the international scene. It gave local talent to go abroad and show what they have to offer. And so it is kind of poignant in a way. When this book ended, I thought this is something that we will never see again. At least my children will never see again. But it's also important that it's there in a tangible form. And I have to say, I'm really grateful to the people who gave us time for the interviews, although they were conducted at some of the craziest times. I interviewed Amina Haq at 3 in the morning because she's in New York.
Oh, wow. So you had to set an alarm for that.
I had to set an alarm. I had a toddler in my arm. I was giving him his bottle and I was cradling the phone in the other, 3 a.m. with the azan going on in the background.
Oh my gosh. And to me, this makes this project even more special because both of you have little kids. And both of you are like burning the midnight oil and working on this book. And it couldn't have been easy, with fashion people. And
no, it wasn't. My
opinions. And I'm sure there must have been rivalries. And
of course there were rivalries. My children and I, we were fighting over paper. I had to print a book and they wanted to draw. So priority was given to a book. And to date, they keep asking me, where is that book?
Where is it?
That was printed obviously on their drawing paper. And
no, but what about like the people in the book? You feel, you hear about like fashion people and everybody, when you have so many creative, intelligent, passionate people working together, there's bound to be, you must have had to sort of navigate all of that as well?
That was actually, there was definitely, it's difficult when you have so many people from so many different backgrounds. You can, one solution does not apply to all, obviously.
Right.
So there was a bit of a difficulty in navigating how to deal with people. Some have very old-fashioned values. Some were very open to the idea. Others needed convincing. And if anything, it's indicative of what a mix of Pakistanis we are as a nation. And there's no one cohesive group of people when you say, this is Pakistan and this is who we are. Not at all. So looking back now, I have to say that it was interesting and it was a real insight into how our people really think and how diverse they are.
And that's so great because again, like clothes manifest that kind of celebration of cultures.
Absolutely.
Where, like, I'm in a sari. It's as much as it's as much mine as it is somebody's in
he's
Bombay.
wearing a kurta. I'm wearing this Masuri dupatta from I got this from Multan.
Right.
And it just goes to show that how what we wear, going back to when I first started noticing what people were wearing. We are literally wearing our culture on our sleeve at every single time. Every single moment.
There's no one cohesive culture. We talk a lot about what is Pakistani culture and things are not in our culture.
Yes.
Like, what is that culture? That culture is so diverse and so rich and so interesting. And why should it be limited to sort of one thing or another? And I really feel like on one level, it can't be.
No, it cannot be because you have a wonderful melting pot of different ethnicities, of different types of style, different styles of dressing, different craftsmanship. The karigars all work differently. And if anything, that should be celebrated. It shouldn't be just put aside.
I'm really proud of this industry. And when Mehr approached me with the idea of, creating this book, I was surprised how no one has done this book before.
Yes.
Because the fashion industry is technically the only industry we have here in Pakistan, which is like a proper structured industry. The music industry is not really an industry. It's, it's nothing close to what the fashion industry is. So in fact, when I was hunting for archives, I met some of the older photographers and, they didn't share their work with us because they were like, I'm working on my own book. So clearly that meant I'm not going to get anything. So I told them, you can give us like the second grade stuff, like the B grade stuff.
You don't need.
Yeah, like the extras maybe, but yeah. So that actually made the process a bit difficult for us. Because when word got around, there were a lot of other people who had like under the pipeline maybe similar ideas of creating similar books. So that made the process a bit difficult, but I'm still very happy. We have people like Rehana Hakim at Newsline.
Yeah.
She was very helpful. I just stormed into her office and, she trusted me with her basement for like 6 hours.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was,
like, putting stuff in your backpack and run away with it. Ethical researcher.
Exactly. And when I was going through the archives, I knew that I probably not get this opportunity again.
Yes.
So I, also scanned a lot of stuff, maybe relating to my interests of music and culture and society also, like a lot of older ads, for example. So because I felt, for example, I saw this ad in Newsline. It talked about how Junoon's first concert, for example, way back in the 90s, like early 90s. So I have a scan of that.
Wow.
So a lot of interesting stuff I was able to, somehow archive as well. And that actually led me to this idea that I told Mehr we should, have our own archives, like an image library.
Good idea.
So I intend to create something along those lines. So
that's so cool.
And instead of actually holding it all, if in the future someone wants to do a book on something else, and I'll just let them have the archives because,
why not?
This is how we grow, isn't it?
Exactly.
And we have such a sort of rich pop culture, and all of this does come under the umbrella of pop culture, I imagine, because we have a lot of work that's being done on history and a lot of kind of, preservation and things like that. We have those kind of serious archives. But it's so exciting to consider that there's so many cool things that we can learn just by going back. Like people were doing all these amazing things. Like, what about things like typography and fonts and like what those posters were like visually?
Absolutely.
We don't have to even look to the West necessarily for a lot of things.
No, not at all. And it's very important that our future generations have access to these things because they'll understand the varying stages of Pakistan as a country and how it's evolved and how it's grown. And we have so much to offer. Why would you not want to share it?
Exactly.
That's so great. But again, you have to be able to see it
Huh? You'll see
You have to
it.
be able to see it.
You'll see it.
on your
And once you
coffee
see it,
table.
it'll blow you away. So be prepared.
Amazing. I can't
Yeah.
wait. I'm so excited. Before we wrap up, I want you guys have to tell me like a funny story about what something that happened during the book. Something. I want something. Because this is so exciting and there's such a good vibe. I can't wait to see this book, but I also want to be like,
Something funny.
or some sort of like just something that's fun. Like give something for our viewers to chew on. Did you guys fight?
No.
No,
There
we
was no
didn't
fashion
actually.
drama.
Saad would disappear for days on end.
That's not dramatic. He had
He
a
really
toddler.
would. He really would. I'd be ringing him, messaging with some breakthrough. And you know, it's
No, that's not good enough. I wanted to have some like diva spat or some fashion person saying that,
oh, we can't.
my way or the highway. Or
Yeah, we cannot say that. Sorry.
they're going to err on the side of discretion.
Yeah.
And also, I think, leave something for August when the book is going to come out. Thank you so much, Mehr. And thank you so
you.
much, Saad, for
Thank
coming
you.
on
Thank
the
you for
show.
having us here.
Talk about your wonderful project that we're so excited and really looking forward to reading. And thank you guys for joining us. And we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.